In a small fishing village along the coast of Maine, where salt air mixed with the smell of fresh catch and wooden boats creaked against weathered docks, lived a woman named Ruth Mason. Her hands were rough from years of work at the local cannery, her back slightly bent from carrying heavy loads, but her spirit remained unbroken. Ruth's husband, Thomas, had been a fisherman who went out one stormy morning and never returned. The sea had claimed him when their son Daniel was barely 3 years old. That day, Ruth made a promise over her husband's empty grave. Their boy would have a better life. Every morning, Ruth woke at 4 to prepare for her shift at the seafood processing plant. The work was cold, repetitive, and exhausting. Her fingers moved mechanically through mountains of shellfish, sorting and packing while the factory foreman shouted orders. But she never complained. Each paycheck, no matter how small, was a step toward Daniel's future. In the evenings, she took a second job cleaning offices in the nearby town. She would scrub floors until her knees ached, empty trash bins, and polish windows until they sparkled. Sometimes she wouldn't get home until midnight, only to wake again at 4. Daniel grew up watching his mother sacrifice everything. He saw her worn clothes, her tired eyes, the way she would pretend she wasn't hungry so he could have an extra helping at dinner. When he was 10, he found her crying quietly in the kitchen one night, holding an overdue electric bill. "Mama, I can quit school and work," he offered, his young voice trembling. Ruth dried her tears and pulled him close. "No, my sweet boy. Education is the only inheritance I can give you. Everything I do is so you won't have to live like this." That conversation burned itself into Daniel's memory. From that moment, he studied with fierce determination. While other kids played after school, Daniel buried himself in books at the public library. His teachers noticed his hunger for knowledge and helped however they could, providing extra materials and tutoring. When Daniel earned a full scholarship to Boston University to study software engineering, Ruth held the acceptance letter with shaking hands. She had done it. Her boy was going to escape the life of struggle she had known. The day Daniel left for college, Ruth stood on the dock watching the bus disappear down the coastal highway. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling suddenly empty. Would her son remember where he came from? Would success change him? But Daniel never forgot. Every late night studying, every difficult exam, every moment of doubt, he thought of his mother's cracked hands and tired smile. He made a silent vow. When he succeeded, his mother would never work another day. Tell us where you're watching from. Boston, Portland, Toronto, London, Sydney? Drop your location in the comments below so we can see how far this story of love and sacrifice travels. Don't forget to like this video if Ruth's dedication touched your heart, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that remind us what truly matters in life. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. Boston welcomed Daniel with towering buildings and endless possibilities. The city hummed with ambition, its streets filled with students and entrepreneurs chasing dreams. But Daniel carried something different in his heart. Not just ambition for himself, but a burning desire to repay his mother's sacrifices. His first year at university was brutal. While his classmates came from comfortable backgrounds with safety nets and family support, Daniel worked 3 part-time jobs while maintaining his studies. He delivered food, tutored younger students, and worked overnight security shifts at a campus building. Some nights, he survived on instant noodles and black coffee. His clothes were secondhand, his laptop barely functional, and his dorm room was the smallest on campus. But none of that mattered. Every hardship was temporary. His mother's suffering had lasted decades. In his computer science classes, Daniel discovered he had a gift. Code made sense to him in ways that amazed his professors. While others struggled with complex algorithms, Daniel saw patterns and solutions with unusual clarity. His projects consistently earned top marks. During his junior year, Daniel attended a hackathon competition. The challenge was to create an app that solved a real-world problem. While teams around him built social media platforms and gaming apps, Daniel thought about his mother. Ruth had recently called, her voice confused. She had gotten lost on her way home from the grocery store. Streets she had walked for 30 years suddenly felt unfamiliar. Daniel's heart had dropped. She was only 55, but already showing signs of early memory issues from years of exhaustion and stress. For 48 hours straight, Daniel coded furiously. He built an app called SafePath, a simple interface designed for elderly users that provided easy navigation, emergency contacts, and automatic location sharing with family members. The app would send alerts if someone deviated from their regular routes or seemed disoriented. When he presented it, the judges were silent. Then they erupted in applause. First place. But more importantly, 3 venture capital firms approached him that night with funding offers. Within months, SafePath launched publicly. The timing was perfect. An aging population, concerned families, and increasing awareness of elderly safety issues. The app went viral. Downloads hit 1 million within the first month. News outlets called Daniel a compassionate innovator. Investors competed to back his growing company. By his senior year, Daniel's company was valued at $50 million. By the time he graduated, he was worth over $200 million. The Fishing Village Kid was now one of the youngest tech CEOs in the country. At his graduation ceremony, when asked about his inspiration, Daniel's voice broke. "Everything I've built is because of my mother, who showed me that real strength isn't about money or status. It's about protecting the people you love, no matter the cost." But through all his success, Ruth remained in Maine, still working at the cannery. She refused his money, insisting she would pay off her own debts. Daniel realized he needed to bring her into his new world, whether she liked it or not. The day he returned to the village in a hired car, Ruth was hanging laundry in the backyard of their tiny rental house. When she saw him, she dropped the clothespin she was holding. "Daniel, what are you doing here? You should be working." He embraced her, feeling how thin she had become. "Mama, pack your things. You're coming with me. Your days of working yourself to exhaustion are over." Ruth protested, but Daniel was insistent. Within a week, he had moved her to his new penthouse apartment in Boston, a space so large it could fit their entire village house 5 times over. The first night, Ruth couldn't sleep. She wandered through the gleaming rooms, touching expensive furniture carefully, as if it might break. This wasn't her world, but it was Daniel's world, and that made a home. Daniel's success opened doors he never imagined existed. Exclusive events, high society gatherings, and networking dinners filled his calendar. But he never attended without feeling slightly out of place. He could wear expensive suits now, but underneath, he was still the boy from the fishing village. Ruth adjusted slowly to city life. She insisted on cooking her own meals, much to the confusion of the household staff Daniel had hired. She woke early out of habit, even though there was no factory shift waiting. The penthouse felt like a museum to her, beautiful but cold. "Mama, you need a rest," Daniel would say, finding her scrubbing kitchen counters at dawn. "Resting makes me feel useless," she'd reply with a gentle smile. "Let me be myself, Daniel. I'm happy helping." Daniel understood. Work was her identity, her purpose. So he let her be, grateful just to have her safe and healthy. Then, at a charity gala for elderly care services, an event Daniel sponsored personally, he met Elena Westbrook. Elena walked into the ballroom like she owned it. Her emerald dress hugged her perfectly, her hair cascaded in elegant waves, and her smile could light up the darkest room. She was a marketing executive for a luxury brand, the daughter of a prominent real estate developer, and accustomed to the finest things in life. When she approached Daniel's table, every head turned. "You're Daniel Mason," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "I've been wanting to meet the genius behind SafePath. Your story is remarkable." Daniel was captivated immediately. Elena was sophisticated, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in his work. They talked for hours that night about technology, philanthropy, and ambitions. She laughed at his jokes and listened intently when he spoke about his mother's sacrifices. "That's beautiful," Elena said, touching his arm. "A man who honors his mother is a rare treasure." Over the following months, Daniel and Elena became inseparable. She introduced him to her world of gallery openings, exclusive restaurants, and weekend getaways to Martha's Vineyard. He felt like he was living a dream, successful, in love, and finally able to provide for his mother. When he brought Elena home to meet Ruth, he expected them to connect immediately. After all, the two most important women in his life should naturally love each other, right? The meeting was cordial but strained. Ruth prepared a simple home-cooked meal, fish chowder, the way she had made it for years. Elena pushed the food around her plate politely, but barely ate. "This is very traditional," Elena said with a tight smile. Ruth noticed, but said nothing. After dinner, while Daniel was on a work call, Ruth tried to make conversation. "Elena, tell me about your family." "Oh, they're busy with their businesses. We're not particularly close," Elena replied, checking her phone. Not everyone has that simple village dynamic. The word simple stung, though Elena probably didn't mean it cruelly. Ruth saw something in Elena's eyes when she looked at her. Not warmth, but something closer to pity mixed with discomfort. After Elena left that evening, Ruth gently touched Daniel's shoulder. "Are you sure about her, my son?" "Mama, I love her. She makes me happy." Ruth nodded slowly. "Then I'm happy too." But worry settled in her chest like a stone. Over the next few months, Daniel was too in love to notice the small signs. How Elena would stiffen when Ruth entered a room. How she'd make subtle comments about Ruth's simple clothes or thick Maine accent. How she'd schedule activities to keep Daniel away from home more often. When Daniel proposed to Elena on a beach in the Hamptons, she said yes with a dazzling smile and a kiss that made him feel like the luckiest man alive. He called his mother immediately with the news. Ruth's congratulations sounded genuine, but tears rolled down her cheeks after she hung up. Tears Daniel couldn't see through the phone. She knew what was coming, even if her son didn't. A storm was brewing, and the wedding day would reveal everyone's true nature. The engagement announcement made headlines. Tech billionaire Daniel Mason to marry marketing executive Elena Westbrook. Photos of the happy couple flooded social media. Daniel looking proud and slightly overwhelmed. Elena radiating confidence and beauty. Elena took control of the wedding planning immediately, treating it less like a celebration of love and more like a corporate product launch. Everything had to be perfect, expensive, and most importantly, impressive. "We're booking the Riverside estate," Elena announced one evening, scrolling through her iPad. "It's where the governor's daughter got married. Guest list will be around 500, mostly investors, clients, and influential people. This is as much a networking opportunity as a wedding." Daniel frowned slightly. 500? I was thinking something smaller, more intimate. Elena laughed, kissing his cheek. "Daniel, sweetheart, you're not a fishing village boy anymore. You're CEO. People expect a certain caliber of event from someone of your stature." He wanted to protest, but didn't want to seem ungrateful. Elena was handling everything, after all, and maybe she was right. Maybe this was just how things were done in this world. The budget ballooned to astronomical numbers. Designer dress from Paris, $80,000. Flowers imported from Ecuador, $30,000. Celebrity chef, $50,000. Ice sculptures, string quartet, imported champagne, gold embossed invitations. The costs kept climbing. Ruth watched quietly from the sidelines, increasingly invisible in the whirlwind of preparations. When she tried to offer suggestions, perhaps some traditional elements from Daniel's hometown or involving local vendors, Elena politely dismissed them. "That's sweet, Ruth, but this needs to have a certain aesthetic. We're going for elegant sophistication, not rustic charm." Daniel noticed his mother withdrawing, but attributed it to normal wedding stress. He was so busy with work and wedding logistics that he missed the deepening cracks. One afternoon, Ruth visited the wedding venue to see where the ceremony would take place. The Riverside estate was magnificent. Rolling lawns, a grand ballroom with crystal chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. It was beautiful but cold. Nothing about it felt like Daniel or like family. A wedding coordinator mistook Ruth for one of the service staff. "Excuse me, the vendor entrance is around back. Deliveries need to be coordinated with the events manager." Ruth didn't correct her. She simply nodded and left quietly, feeling more out of place than ever. The week before the wedding, Elena had a meltdown during the final dress fitting. "This bustle isn't right. The train needs to flow perfectly. How hard is this to understand?" The seamstress, a woman in her 60s, apologized profusely, tears in her eyes. Ruth, who had accompanied them, gently intervened. "Perhaps if we—" "Ruth, please. You don't understand haute couture. Just let the professionals handle it." Daniel received a call from his mother that night. Her voice was quiet, measured. "Daniel, are you truly happy?" "Of course, Mama. Why do you ask?" A long pause. "Just making sure, my son. Just making sure." The day before the wedding, the estate was in controlled chaos. Vendors rushed in and out. The catering team set up the kitchen, and decorators transformed the ballroom into what Elena called a fairy tale palace. Elena stood in the center, directing everyone like a general commanding troops. When a server dropped a single wine glass, she exploded. "Do you know how much those cost? I specifically ordered Bohemian Crystal. Be more careful." Ruth witnessed the outburst from across the room. She saw the server, a young man, maybe 20 years old, apologize repeatedly, his face red with embarrassment. Something in Ruth's gut twisted. This wasn't love. This was control. That evening, Ruth found Daniel alone on the estate's terrace, looking out at the water. "Tomorrow's a big day," she said softly, standing beside him. "Yeah, I can hardly believe it's happening. Daniel, if you ever have doubts—" "Mama, please. Not you too. Everyone keeps questioning Elena, but they don't know her like I do. She's just stressed because she wants everything perfect." Ruth placed her hand over his. "Perfection doesn't matter, my son. What matters is kindness, respect, and genuine love. Does she show you those things?" Daniel pulled his hand away, frustrated. "Why can't you just be happy for me? I am happy if you're happy. But I'm your mother. It's my job to protect you, even from yourself sometimes." Daniel walked away without responding, leaving Ruth alone on the terrace. She looked up at the stars, the same stars that shone over their little fishing village, and prayed she was wrong about Elena. But deep down, she knew she wasn't. Tomorrow would reveal the truth, and that truth would arrive with a slap that would echo far beyond the wedding day. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, gentle breeze, and sunshine that made the riverside estate look like something from a magazine cover. Inside, however, tensions ran high. Elena woke up in the bridal suite, surrounded by her bridesmaids, makeup artists, and hairstylists. The room buzzed with activity. Champagne flowed freely, and every detail of her appearance was scrutinized and perfected. "More highlighter on the cheekbones," Elena commanded, studying herself in the mirror. "I need to look flawless from every angle." The photographer costs a fortune. Every shot needs to be Instagram perfect. Meanwhile, Ruth dressed quietly in her modest guest room. She had chosen a simple but elegant navy blue dress, appropriate for a mother of the groom. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. When had she gotten so many gray hairs? Why had the lines around her eyes grown so deep? She thought about Daniel's father, wishing he could be here to see their son marry. Would Thomas approve of Elena? Would he see what Ruth saw? Across the estate, Daniel prepared with his groomsmen. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his bow tie. "Was it normal to feel this anxious on your wedding day?" "You okay, man?" his best friend Marcus asked. "Yeah, just big day, you know." But it wasn't just nerves. Something felt off, though Daniel couldn't name it. He pushed the feeling down, telling himself it was cold feet, nothing more. The estate quickly filled with guests, exactly 500 as Elena had planned. Prominent business leaders, tech investors, socialites, and influencers, all dressed in their finest. Photographers captured every moment. It was less a wedding than a spectacle. Ruth sat in a pew toward the middle of the room, feeling invisible among the sea of designer clothes and expensive jewelry. Several guests glanced at her curiously, probably wondering who this simple-dressed woman was among Boston's elite. Behind the scenes, chaos erupted in the catering area. The event had grown so large and complex that the service staff was stretched thin. Multiple events were happening simultaneously: cocktail hour, the ceremony setup, and preparation for the reception dinner. The head coordinator rushed around frantically. "We need more hands. Where's the backup team?" A supervisor shook his head. "2 people called in sick. We're short-staffed." Ruth, waiting near the entrance to be escorted to her seat, overheard the conversation. Years of working multiple jobs had given her an instinct to help when she saw people struggling. She approached the coordinator. "Excuse me, I can help if you need an extra pair of hands." The coordinator looked relieved. "Oh, thank you. We just need someone to help carry champagne trays to the VIP lounge before the ceremony. It's simple work." Ruth nodded. "Of course. Show me where." They provided her with a simple black service vest to wear over her dress, just to maintain the uniform appearance staff needed. Ruth didn't mind. Work was work, and she was glad to be useful rather than sitting idle. She carried trays of crystal champagne flutes carefully through the crowded estate, weaving between guests who didn't see her, didn't notice her, treated her as part of the furniture. This was familiar territory, being invisible, being the person who made things run smoothly while others took credit. But Ruth didn't feel bitter about it. She felt purposeful. The ceremony was about to begin. Guests settled into their seats. The string quartet began playing. Daniel took his position at the altar, his eyes scanning the crowd until he found his mother, except she wasn't in her seat. Where is she? Before he could think about it further, the wedding march began. All heads turned toward the entrance. And there was Elena, descending the grand staircase in her magnificent gown, looking every bit the vision she'd paid a fortune to become. Daniel's breath caught. She was beautiful, undeniably. But as she walked toward him, smiling that perfect smile, a voice in his head whispered something he'd been ignoring for months. Does she love you? Or does she love what you represent? He shook the thought away. Too late for doubts now. The ceremony proceeded flawlessly. Perfectly scripted vows, perfectly timed music, perfectly coordinated. It was a performance, and everyone played their part beautifully. Except something was about to shatter that perfection. Something that would expose the difference between a beautiful facade and genuine character. And it would all begin with one small, accidental spill. The ceremony concluded with applause and cheers. Daniel and Elena walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, all smiles and perfect poses for the swarm of photographers. Guests moved into the cocktail hour while the newlyweds prepared for their grand entrance into the reception. Elena stood in the preparation room, touching up her makeup and adjusting her dress. Her bridesmaids fussed around her, ensuring every detail remained flawless. "This is going perfectly," Elena said, admiring herself in the mirror. "Absolutely perfectly." Meanwhile, Ruth had finished helping with the champagne service and was removing the service vest when the head coordinator rushed up to her again, frantic. "I'm so sorry to ask, but could you help us one more time? We need someone to carry VIP gift baskets to the head table. Just one more task, I promise." Ruth nodded graciously. "Of course, dear. Whatever you need." She picked up an ornate tray holding crystal champagne flutes meant for the head table. The finest glasses reserved for the bride, groom, and their closest family members. Ruth carried it carefully through the bustling ballroom, navigating around guests and decorations. Elena entered the ballroom for her grand reception entrance, pausing at the top of the stairs as photographers captured her descent. The spotlight followed her, and every eye in the room locked onto the radiant bride. Ruth, focused on not dropping the expensive glassware, didn't see Elena descending the same staircase. She stepped forward just as Elena reached the bottom step. Their paths intersected in a moment of pure accident. Ruth's foot caught slightly on the hem of Elena's extensive train. The tray tilted, and a single champagne flute tumbled forward, splashing golden liquid across the pristine white fabric of Elena's dress. Time seemed to stop. Elena looked down at the spreading stain on her $80,000 gown. Her face went from shock to fury in an instant. "What have you done?" Elena's shriek silenced the entire ballroom. The music stopped. Conversations died. Every head turned toward the commotion. Ruth's eyes went wide with horror. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. It was an accident." "An accident?" Elena's voice reached a pitch that made guests wince. "Do you have any idea how much this dress costs? Do you have any idea?" Ruth bent down immediately, trying to blot the stain with a napkin from the tray. "Please, let me help fix." "Don't touch it." Elena slapped Ruth's hands away. "You've done enough damage, you stupid clumsy." The next part happened so fast that many guests would later disagree about the exact sequence of events. Elena, consumed by rage and humiliation in front of 500 guests, raised her hand and struck Ruth across the face. The sound of the slap echoed through the silent ballroom like a gunshot. Ruth stumbled backward, her hand flying to her reddening cheek, her eyes wide with shock and pain. The crystal tray clattered to the marble floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces, a sound that perfectly matched the shattering of dignity, respect, and illusion happening in that moment. "Get away from me!" Elena screamed, her voice raw with contempt. "Useless, incompetent servant. You've ruined my wedding. You've ruined everything. Get out. Get out before I have security throw you out." Guests gasped. Phones emerged from pockets and purses, cameras already recording. The scene was too shocking, too dramatic not to capture. Ruth stood frozen, her hand still pressed to her burning cheek, tears welling in her eyes. Not from physical pain, but from the depths of humiliation she thought she'd left behind in her poverty-stricken past. And then, from across the ballroom, cutting through the shocked silence like a knife, came a voice that made Elena's blood run cold. "What did you just do?" Daniel appeared at the entrance, still in his tuxedo, his face a mask of horror and disbelief. He had been taking photos in another room and had rushed over when he heard the commotion. His eyes locked on the scene before him. His mother, the woman he loved more than life itself, holding her reddening cheek. And his bride, his wife of less than an hour, standing over her with contempt blazing in her eyes. "Elena," Daniel's voice trembled with barely contained emotion. "What have you done?" Elena's fury faltered for just a second as she registered his presence. Then her pride kicked in, refusing to back down. This server ruined my dress. She destroyed it." Daniel's eyes moved from Elena to his mother, then back again. "Server." His voice grew dangerously quiet. "That server is my mother." The ballroom erupted in gasps and shocked whispers. Elena's face went pale as the blood drained from it. "What?" she whispered. "You just slapped my mother," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "On our wedding day, in front of 500 people. You slapped my mother." The Riverside Estate's grand ballroom, moments ago filled with celebration and music, now hung in suffocating silence. 500 guests stood frozen, witnessing a moment that would define everyone involved. Daniel moved through the crowd like a man in a trance, his eyes never leaving his mother. Ruth still stood with her hand pressed to her cheek, trying to hold back tears. When Daniel reached her, he gently took her hand away to see the red mark blooming across her skin. "Mama," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Are you hurt?" Ruth shook her head, but tears finally spilled down her cheeks. "I'm fine, Daniel. It was an accident. The dress, I didn't mean to." "Stop." Daniel's voice was firm but gentle. "Don't apologize for something that wasn't your fault." He turned to face Elena, who stood motionless in her stained dress, her expression flickering between defiance and dawning realization of what she'd done. "You want to know something, Elena?" Daniel's words came out measured, each one deliberate. "That woman you just struck is the reason I'm standing here today. She worked 2 jobs for 20 years to give me a chance at education. She went hungry so I could eat. She sacrificed everything, her health, her youth, her own dreams, so I could become the man you decided was worth marrying." Elena's mouth opened, but no words came out. "I told you about my mother," Daniel continued, his voice rising with emotion. "I told you everything she'd been through. I told you how hard she worked, how much she suffered. And you looked at her and saw a servant? Someone beneath you." "Daniel, I didn't know." Elena finally found her voice. "You didn't know?" Daniel's laugh was bitter. "You've met her dozens of times. You sat at dinner tables with her. You just didn't bother to notice her because she wasn't wearing designer clothes or speaking with the right accent." Guests watched in stunned silence, phones still recording every moment. This wasn't the fairy tale wedding reception they'd expected. This was something much more real, much more uncomfortable. Marcus, Daniel's best friend, pushed through the crowd to Ruth's side. "Mrs. Mason, let me help you to a seat." "Thank you," Dear boy, Ruth said softly, her dignity intact despite everything. Elena watched them, her mind racing. The stain on her dress suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the stain this moment would leave on her reputation. She had to salvage this somehow. Daniel, please, let me explain. She reached for his arm. He stepped back, avoiding her touch. Explain what exactly? Explain how you can stand in front of God and 500 witnesses, say vows about love and honor, and then assault my mother less than an hour later? Explain that to me, Elena. She ruined my dress. Elena's voice rose defensively. Do you know how much this cost? This was supposed to be perfect. Perfect. Daniel's shout made several guests jump. You assaulted a 60-year-old woman over a dress. Over fabric and thread? Do you hear yourself? Elena's facade began to crumble. Tears, whether of genuine remorse or fear of consequences, started flowing. I worked so hard to make this day perfect. I just wanted everything to be beautiful. My mother is beautiful, Daniel interrupted quietly. Her heart, her sacrifice, her strength, that's real beauty. Not this. He gestured around the opulent ballroom. Not any of this. He walked to where Ruth sat, Marcus standing protectively beside her. Daniel knelt before his mother, taking her weathered hands in his. Mama, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I brought you here, that I let you be treated this way. You tried to warn me, and I didn't listen. Ruth cupped his face with one hand. You followed your heart, my son. That's all I ever wanted for you. My heart led me wrong, he said quietly. I was so blinded by the idea of this life that I forgot what actually matters. He stood, helping his mother to her feet with care and respect. Then he turned to address the entire ballroom, his voice clear and steady. I apologize to all of you for coming here today. I realize now this wedding should never have happened. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I was marrying an image, not a person. I was marrying the idea of success and acceptance into a world I didn't belong in. But in doing so, I betrayed the only person who ever truly loved me unconditionally. Elena's crying intensified. Daniel, no, please, we can work this out. How? Daniel asked simply. How do we work out the fact that you hit my mother? That you humiliated her in front of hundreds of people? That given the choice between compassion and protecting your image, you chose cruelty. I'll apologize. I'll do whatever it takes. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. The apology should go to her, not me. Elena turned to Ruth, mascara streaming down her face, her perfect wedding makeup destroyed. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean. You did mean it, Ruth said softly, but her words carried across the silent room. In that moment, you meant every bit of it. The question is whether you're sorry for what you did or sorry you got caught. Elena had no answer to that. Daniel took off his wedding ring, worn for less than 2 hours, and placed it on the head table. This marriage is over before it began. I'll contact lawyers tomorrow to handle the annulment. The news spread faster than anyone could have imagined. By the next morning, the video of Elena slapping Ruth had gone viral. 20 million views. 50 million. The numbers kept climbing. Bride assault, mother-in-law at wedding dominated headlines. Social media exploded with commentary. Elena's name trended worldwide, but not in the way she'd planned. In a hotel room across town, Daniel sat with his mother, both of them still processing what had happened. They had left the Riverside estate immediately after his announcement, leaving guests, chaos, and a destroyed wedding behind them. Are you sure about this? Ruth asked quietly. Legally ending a marriage after just hours. That's serious, Daniel. Mama, if I wasn't sure about ending it, I wouldn't have been sure about starting it. He looked at her, his eyes tired but clear. I should have listened to you from the beginning. Ruth squeezed his hand. The heart doesn't always listen to warnings. Sometimes it needs to learn its own lessons. Meanwhile, across the city, Elena faced her own reckoning. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications, mostly hate messages, lost sponsorships, and severed business relationships. Her marketing firm called. Elena, we need to discuss your position here. The company can't be associated with this kind of publicity. Brands dropped her. Friends stopped answering calls. Her social media following, once in the millions, plummeted as people unfollowed in droves. But the legal consequences were worse. Daniel filed charges for assault and elder abuse. The case was straightforward. Hundreds of witnesses, clear video evidence, undeniable harm. Elena's lawyer advised her to settle quietly, but her pride wouldn't allow it. "I'll fight this," she insisted. "It was an accident in the heat of the moment." "It was assault," her lawyer replied flatly. "Caught on camera, against a 60-year-old woman, at your wedding. There's no defense here." The trial lasted 3 weeks. The courtroom was packed every day. Journalists, curious onlookers, and people who had been moved by Ruth's dignity throughout the ordeal. When Ruth took the stand, the prosecutor asked her to describe what happened. She spoke quietly but clearly, her words measured and honest. She didn't exaggerate, didn't seek sympathy. She simply told the truth. Elena's attorney tried to paint Ruth as manipulative, suggesting she had inserted herself into the wedding to cause problems. But when cross-examined, Ruth's simple response silenced the courtroom. "I was helping because the staff needed assistance. I didn't know whose wedding it was supposed to be at that moment. I only knew people were overwhelmed, and I could help. That's what I've done my whole life, help when help is needed." The judge, a woman in her 70s, removed her glasses and looked directly at Elena. "Ms. Westbrook, regardless of who that woman was, whether she was the groom's mother or a complete stranger, your actions were inexcusable. You assaulted someone over fabric, over appearances, over pride." The verdict came swiftly, guilty of assault. Elena was sentenced to 6 months of supervised community service working with elderly populations, mandatory anger management courses, a restraining order preventing contact with Daniel or Ruth, and the marriage was formally annulled. As Elena left the courthouse, reporters swarmed her. She had no statement, no apology, just tears of self-pity that the cameras captured mercilessly. Meanwhile, Ruth stood on the courthouse steps beside Daniel, her hand in his. A reporter called out, "Mrs. Mason, how do you feel about the verdict?" Ruth paused, then spoke softly but firmly. "I hope she learns that kindness costs nothing, but its absence can cost everything." That quote went viral immediately, shared millions of times across social media. Ruth became an unexpected symbol, not of victimhood, but of dignity, grace, and the strength of mothers everywhere who sacrifice everything for their children. Daniel looked at his mother with tears in his eyes. "You're too good, Mama. Too forgiving." "I'm not forgiving for her benefit," Ruth replied. "I'm forgiving for ours. Carrying hate is too heavy a burden." That night, back in their home, Daniel sat with Ruth in comfortable silence. The weight of everything that had happened, the wedding, the slap, the trial, the media circus, finally began to lift. "What happens now?" Daniel asked. Ruth smiled. "Now we live, not in the shadow of what happened, but in the light of what we learned. You learned who truly matters. I learned that even in pain, there's a chance to teach the world something important." And what do we teach them? That real wealth isn't measured in dollars or status. It's measured in character, compassion, and the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it costs you everything. Daniel hugged his mother tightly, grateful beyond words for her wisdom, her strength, and her unwavering love. 6 months passed. Daniel threw himself into his work, expanding SafePath to help even more families. But his greatest joy came from the simple moments with his mother, morning coffee, evening walks, and long conversations about everything and nothing. Ruth, meanwhile, found new purpose. She began volunteering at a community center that helped low-income families access resources and support. Her story had made her unexpectedly well-known, and she used that platform to advocate for elderly rights and the importance of family bonds. One afternoon, while Ruth was organizing donated clothes at the center, the volunteer coordinator approached her hesitantly. "Mrs. Mason, there's someone here asking for you. She says it's important." Ruth looked up to see a figure standing in the doorway, backlit by the afternoon sun. As the woman stepped forward, Ruth's breath caught. It was Elena. But this wasn't the polished, arrogant Elena from the wedding. This woman wore simple clothes, no makeup, her hair pulled back in a plain ponytail. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face drawn. She looked like someone who had walked through fire and barely survived. The room went silent. Other volunteers recognized Elena immediately and stepped back, uncertain what would happen. "Mrs. Mason," Elena's voice cracked. "I know I have no right to be here. I know you probably never want to see me again. But I needed to try to speak with you." Ruth studied her for a long moment, then gestured to a quiet corner. "Let's sit." They sat facing each other on worn folding chairs, an entire universe of pain and regret between them. Elena struggled to find words. "I've spent 6 months working at nursing homes and elderly care facilities. At first, I hated it. I thought it was just punishment. But then, I started listening to their stories. I met women who reminded me of you. Women who sacrificed everything for their families, who worked themselves to exhaustion, who never asked for recognition or reward." Tears streamed down Elena's face. "I met a woman named Dorothy. She was 83. She told me about her son who became a doctor. She was so proud of him, but he rarely visited, too busy with his successful life. She said she understood, that she didn't want to burden him. But I could see it in her eyes. She was heartbroken." Elena took a shuddering breath. "And I realized that's what I could have turned Daniel into. Someone who forgot where he came from. Someone who valued success over substance. I was going to take him away from you, not physically, but emotionally. I was going to make him ashamed of his roots, ashamed of you." Ruth remained silent, letting Elena continue. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know that I understand now what I did. I didn't just slap you. I slapped everything you represent. Every sacrifice, every struggle, every ounce of love you poured into raising Daniel. I was cruel in the worst possible way. Why are you really here?" Ruth asked gently. Elena met her eyes. "Because I'm trying to become a better person. And I can't do that without acknowledging what I did to you, face to face, without lawyers or cameras or audiences. Just person to person." Ruth was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke. "Elena, do you know what the hardest part of that day was for me?" Elena shook her head. "It wasn't the slap. It wasn't the humiliation. It was seeing my son's heart break. Watching him realize that the woman he loved wasn't who he thought she was. That was the real pain. I know, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life." Ruth leaned forward. "But here's what I've learned. People can change. Not easily, not quickly, but truly. The question is whether you're changing because you got caught, or because you genuinely see why it was wrong." "I see why it was wrong," Elena said firmly. "I see it every day when I help Mrs. Dorothy to the dining room, or when I read letters to Mr. Chun from his grandchildren who are too busy to visit, or when I watch Mrs. Patel cry because her daughter hasn't called in 3 months. I see your face in every one of them." Ruth nodded slowly. "Then you've learned something valuable. The question is what you'll do with that knowledge." "I'm going to keep working with elderly communities. Not because I have to anymore. My service ended last week. But because I want to. Because maybe if I spend the rest of my life helping mothers like you, it might balance out some of the harm I caused." Ruth reached across and took Elena's hand. A gesture that shocked Elena so much she nearly pulled away. "Elena, I forgave you a long time ago. Not because you earned it, but because carrying anger was poisoning my own peace. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean there are no consequences. You hurt my son deeply. You hurt me. Those scars exist. I know, but," Ruth continued, "I also believe in second chances. I believe people can become better versions of themselves. So here's what I'll say. Prove it. Not to me, not to Daniel, but to yourself. Become the person you wish you had been that day." Elena broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. Ruth sat with her, not hugging her, not offering comfort, but simply being present, a kindness Elena didn't deserve but desperately needed. When Elena finally composed herself, she stood to leave. "Thank you for listening. I won't bother you or Daniel again. But I promise you, I'll spend my life trying to be worthy of the grace you've shown me." As Elena walked away, one of the volunteers approached Ruth. "How can you be so kind to her after what she did?" Ruth smiled sadly. "Because someone once showed me grace when I didn't deserve it. And because hate destroys the person carrying it more than the person it's aimed at." Elena has to live with what she did. That's punishment enough. That evening, Ruth told Daniel about Elena's visit. His face darkened with anger. She came here. She had no right. She had every right to try to make amends. Ruth interrupted gently. Whether we accept those amends is up to us, but we can't stop her from trying to be better. Do you really believe she's changed? Ruth considered the question. I believe she's trying to change. Whether she succeeds isn't for me to judge. But I hope she does, Daniel. Because a world where people can't change is a world without hope. Daniel hugged his mother, marveling once again at her wisdom and capacity for forgiveness. He didn't know if he could be as gracious as she was, but he was grateful to have her as an example. 2 years later, the anniversary of that fateful wedding day arrived. Daniel had long since moved past the pain, focusing instead on building his company and cherishing time with his mother. SafePath had expanded internationally, helping millions of families stay connected and safe. But something unexpected was about to happen. Daniel received an invitation to speak at a national conference on elder care and family services. The venue was packed with social workers, caregivers, healthcare providers, and family advocates. As Daniel stood backstage preparing his speech, the event coordinator approached him. Mr. Mason, there's been a last-minute addition to the program. Someone else has requested to speak briefly before you. We thought you should know. It's Elena Westbrook. Daniel's blood ran cold. What? No, absolutely not. She's not speaking about you or your mother directly. She's been doing remarkable work in elderly advocacy over the past 2 years. Her perspective, as someone who learned these lessons the hard way, is actually quite powerful. But if you're not comfortable, I'm not. The coordinator nodded. I'll tell her she can't speak. But before he could leave, Ruth appeared beside Daniel. She had come to support her son's speech and had overheard the conversation. Let her speak, Ruth said quietly. Mama, no. Daniel, let her speak. If she has something genuine to contribute, it might help people. Isn't that what this conference is about? Daniel struggled with his emotions, but ultimately deferred to his mother's judgment. Fine, but I don't have to like it. Elena took the stage first. The audience recognized her immediately. The wedding slap incident had become part of cultural consciousness. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Elena stood at the podium, no longer the polished, confident woman from 2 years ago. She was humbler, more genuine, visibly nervous. 2 years ago, I committed one of the worst acts of my life, she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. I assaulted an elderly woman at my own wedding because she accidentally spilled champagne on my dress. That woman was my groom's mother, though I didn't know it at the time. And honestly, that's even worse, because it meant I was capable of treating any elderly person with such contempt. The audience was rivalry silent. I'm not here to make excuses or seek sympathy. I'm here because my court-ordered service became the greatest education of my life. For 2 years, I've worked with elderly communities. I've listened to thousands of stories from mothers and fathers who sacrificed everything for children who forgot them. I've held hands with people dying alone because their families were too busy. I've seen the consequences of a society that treats elderly people as burdens rather than treasures. Elena's voice grew stronger. But I've also seen incredible resilience, wisdom, and grace. I've learned that the wrinkled hands we often overlook are the same hands that built the world we inherited. And I've learned that the measure of a society isn't its wealth or technology, it's how we treat our most vulnerable members. She paused, visibly emotional. I can never undo what I did, but I can spend the rest of my life working to ensure that other elderly people are treated with the dignity and respect they deserve. I've started a foundation that provides support services for elderly individuals and educational programs, teaching young people about elder care and respect. It's called Second Chances because that's what I was given and what everyone deserves. The audience erupted in applause, not for Elena personally, but for the message and the work she was describing. As Elena left the stage, she made brief eye contact with Daniel and Ruth in the wings. She nodded respectfully and kept walking, not presuming to approach them. Daniel took the stage next, his prepared speech suddenly feeling insufficient. He spoke from his heart instead. My mother is here today. Mama, can you stand up? Ruth, embarrassed, slowly stood. The audience applauded warmly. Everything I am, everything I've built, exists because of her sacrifices. She worked herself to exhaustion so I could get an education. She went hungry so I could eat. She believed in me when I had no reason to believe in myself. And 2 years ago, someone taught us both a painful but important lesson about how the world sometimes treats people like her. Daniel's voice grew thick with emotion. But my mother taught me something even more important. That forgiveness is stronger than revenge. That grace is more powerful than bitterness. And that the greatest strength isn't in holding grudges. It's in letting them go. He looked directly at his mother. Mama, you've shown me that success means nothing if it doesn't include the people who made it possible. You've taught me that wealth is measured not in bank accounts, but in the richness of our character and the depth of our compassion. The audience rose to their feet, applauding Ruth more than Daniel. She wiped tears from her eyes, overwhelmed by the love and respect in the room. After the conference, as Daniel and Ruth prepared to leave, Elena approached cautiously from a distance. She didn't come close, simply caught Ruth's eye and mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Ruth nodded in acknowledgement, then turned and walked away with her son. In the car driving home, Daniel asked, "Do you think she's really changed?" Ruth smiled. "I think she's trying. And that's all any of us can do. Try to be better today than we were yesterday. I don't know if I could have forgiven her like you did." Forgiveness isn't about excusing what someone did. It's about freeing yourself from the prison of anger. I forgave her so I could move forward, not so she could feel better. Daniel squeezed his mother's hand. "I'm lucky to have you, Mama. And I'm lucky to have you, my son. We're lucky to have each other." As they drove through the city, past towering buildings and busy streets, Ruth thought about how far they'd come. From a tiny fishing village where they struggled to survive, to a life beyond her wildest dreams. But the greatest treasure wasn't the penthouse or the wealth or the recognition. It was this, sitting beside her son, knowing that despite everything, his heart remained good, his values intact, and his love for her unwavering. The wedding slap had been devastating, but it had also revealed truth, taught lessons, and ultimately made both Daniel and Ruth stronger. And somewhere across the city, Elena sat in a small apartment, reading letters from elderly people she'd helped, slowly building a life dedicated to making amends, not just to Ruth, but to every elderly person whose dignity deserved protection. 3 lives forever changed by 1 moment. 3 people learning that our worst moments don't have to define us, but they can transform us if we're brave enough to learn from them. Ruth looked out the window at the sunset, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. She thought about Thomas, her late husband, and smiled. "We did good with our boy," she whispered to the heavens. And somewhere, perhaps, he smiled back. The end. What an incredible journey. What's the biggest lesson you learned from this story? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, smash that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about love, family, and redemption. Share this video with your parents, your siblings, your friends, anyone who needs to be reminded that family is everything. And if your parents are still alive, call them today. Tell them you love them, because someday that opportunity will be gone. Thank you for watching this 10-chapter journey with us. See you in the next story, where we'll explore more tales that remind us what truly matters in life. Until then, honor your parents, show grace to others, and remember, character is revealed not in our best moments, but in how we handle our worst ones.